there's probably going to be a bit less reflection and more where we might go from here. But if I could just start a bit just to actually build on some of the last things we talked about, and that's the permaculture influence. Bob Hopkin, the founder of the transition movement, actually started life as a permaculture teacher. So his foundation was permaculture. And David Holmgren has certainly been looking at the twin challenges of peak oil and climate change. And if you go to www.futurescenarios.org, that's a website that David Holmgren developed to look at future scenarios under those two challenges. And he's written a book which is available in the State Library. And as a recent Tasmanian, can I please give you a congratulations to all of you Tasmanians. The State Library is fantastic. Having come from Victoria where we had local council libraries and the resources are much smaller, having one library across the whole state is a great resource. So I encourage everyone to use it if you don't already. So where to for Tasmania? It really is a difficult topic, and I would be the last person to say I have all the answers, because my own example is actually a fairly sanitary one. Several years ago we were living in Melbourne, aware of the twin challenges of peak oil and climate change. We lived in a great location. We were in East St Kilda, close to the city, fantastic public transport. We had enough land to grow a reasonable amount of food. But the problem was the drought. I don't know if many of you realise that Melbourne finished having its worst drought on record for about 10 or 11 years when the La Nina started. With that drought, we had more and more increasing water restrictions, and so growing vegetables was actually out of the question. And so we sat there in Melbourne looking at getting drier and drier and thinking, how sustainable is this place? And I think it's still an important question. So Tasmania beckoned. So as a response to that, we live in a beautiful place outside Lilydale, but we're 8 kilometres from the nearest shop. How clever was that? So I don't have all the answers. So where to for Tasmania? Today has been mostly positive, but I'm going to introduce just a few quick, not so positive things. And I think that the short-term future are storm clouds for us. I mean, Paul Gilding has commented recently that he thinks that what we're seeing now is the effects of reaching the limits to growth compounded by all the debt that's in the international economies. So I think in the next few years are going to be a fairly rocky one, and I think we'll see ups and downs. And I think one of the biggest threats of those ups and downs is going to be if people don't recognise the limits to growth are behind those ups and downs and just try and treat them as sort of conventional economic problems. And I think that would be a big mistake, and we'll just sort of paint ourselves into a corner if that happens. In the longer term, though, I think Tasmania, I'm here because I think Tasmania has got wonderful advantages. You know, we've got a small population compared to our arable land area. The rainfall is perhaps not so well distributed as suits every location, but we've got good rainfall. The climate change predictions are that good rainfall is not likely to change a huge amount, unlike the mainland, Victoria. We've got quite a decentralised community, which is a problem in terms of transport, but it's an advantage in terms of access to land. We have many advantages, and I mean, one of the things is that we are the place that was the birthplace of permaculture, and that's something I think we should be very proud of, and we should try and take advantage of. Anyway, all that, of course, will point towards a more subsistence lifestyle, but at least it's survival. At the sort of smaller personal, family, small business level, obviously the next steps for everyone is increased resilience. We've talked about resilience a lot. Increased resilience is where we need to focus. Increased focus on energy efficiency. We need to develop or widen our skills. I don't know if many of you have read John Michael Greer's book, The Long Descent, also available from the State Library. But he suggests that everyone should adopt an obsolete technology. And it's a really nice idea. At the community and local government area, the community is much stronger than the sum of its parts. By working together, we will not only survive the transition away from oil, but I think we will prosper. I think we have got a strong future. the last talk was inspiring. I was really interested in your comments, Rod, about the fact that all this sort of activism over the years, that the cumulative impact of that on the council and local, on just the local understanding. And I think that's a wonderful encouragement for all of us who've been doing some of those things ourselves. One of the reasons why I think local government is leading the way, and local government really is leading the way, is that they're not caught up in the sort of growth at all costs philosophy that the state governments and federal government is captive by, because I think the state and federal governments are captive by that, and local government really aren't caught up in that, and that helps you to see things more clearly and just get on with the job of making us more resilient. We do have many transition initiatives in Tasmania. I'm not sure that any of them have got to the stage of starting to develop an energy descent action plan, but just the fact that there are organisations calling them transition is a start, and it does help the process. Well, I have to give myself a small plug here because I was involved in it. We also now have a branch of the Alternative Technology Association in Tasmania in the north of the state. So we had our inaugural meeting 2 weeks ago, so we've got a program of action to start getting going. So at least on the technology side of sustainability, at least we've got that focus with the ATA having a branch here. And I'm really glad that we were able to make that happen. Turning to the state government level, because I think the state government is important to involve the whole community. There was some talk in one of the earlier speakers about getting local low-income people involved, and I think McKim initiated about 12 months ago is important. It's a very important beginning, and I think he should be congratulated on initiating it. Some of us who were involved in that process were a little concerned that it didn't look at supply, but I think we should put that behind us and just move on. The release of the report will be an important opportunity to increase the dialogue in the community, and as we've just learnt, any increase in dialogue in the community could have unexpected benefits. On a personal note, I've, in the last few years, been very frustrated with state and federal governments for not coming clean on peak oil and their lack of leadership. I'm sure that most of them are aware of it. I don't know that all individuals are aware of it, but at the officer and sort of deeper policy level, they are aware of it. But the problem is, I think, that the state and federal governments are caught up in this growth is good paradigm so deeply. You ask any of the politicians, and they talk to the economic growth. We've created jobs. It's so fundamental to what they see as their job is, that the problem for them is that the peak oil really means the end of business as usual. And that's just a hill too far for them to climb publicly. And that's the problem, I think. Some of them talk about energy security, and I'm sure that's code for peak oil. So listen for that, because you do hear talk of energy security. So I think the problem is that they just, it's too hard for them now. But we need to try and help them get over that hill. And my change away from frustration towards understanding, I think, has been helped since I only recently started reading the Transition Handbook. And one of the things that the transition movement tries to do is it tries to be apolitical and inclusive. And I think that they're very important things. So what should we do as a group, trying to further the whole society, as well as our own plans and our own responses? Well, I think we need to try and work out a positive vision for Tasmania for the next 20 to 40 years. The more we can picture peak oil as a catalyst, an issue that initiates a move to a future which is intrinsically more desirable rather than as a response to impending catastrophe, the better. It's not always possible to do it completely positively, of course, but the more positive we can put it, the better. I'm thinking that we could perhaps start with a statement of principles that we can fit onto a single sheet of paper that we try and encourage many people to endorse. I was actually even thinking of a grandiose name like the Glebe Declaration, considering that's where we are now. But if we did write down something, and it would have to contain things like, we need to respond to this, resilience, reskilling, equity, I think is important, the fact that we need to manage peak oil and climate change as a whole, but then talk about the positives of moving in the directions that we need to move. I think that would give us something we could then sit down with politicians and discuss. So that's one thing we can do. We obviously need to support each other, both in our own planning and particularly psychologically. And as we do more training and sort of get more people involved in the Peak Oil story, then the psychological support is important. Because how many people here found it quite hard when they first encountered the message? Yes, it is a difficult issue for us to get our brain around, and it is psychologically challenging. So we just need to accept that and help to support people. We need to support our community groups and local governments, and it's just been wonderful to hear what's been going on. And finally, we do need to work with our state politicians of all persuasions to try and get them over that hill where they can talk about peak oil publicly and the need for all Tasmanians to prepare. I don't know exactly how we're going to be able to do that, but I am sure that adopting an us versus them approach will not help. So anything we can do to help them get there, I think would be good. Something like the GLEE declaration might be help. The release of the peak oil vulnerability study, I'm sure will be a good opportunity for dialogue. There have been some discussions about some further studies here. I think all those things would help. One of the things I've noticed since moving from Victoria is how much more accessible our politicians in Tasmania are than they are in Victoria, and that's another strength that we have in this community. You know, we've got lots of advantages. If any state in Australia can get this act together first, it should be us on a state level. So finally, we are living in interesting times. My parents had the challenge of World War II. My father was a prisoner of war in Thailand, on the Burma-Thailand Railway. Present-day Australians have got the challenge of drawing back from what John Michael Greer calls our unearned prosperity due to our access to plentiful supplies of cheap oil. I'm confident that working together we can rise to this challenge.